I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
A couple of days ago, my husband and I went to a wake for a friend and former colleague. He was 68, which is less than that 4 score and 10 that we all think we're at least promised. He left a wife who he loved dearly and two grown sons who were in their mid and late 20s, which is still, I think, way too early to lose a parent. But my friend had had cancer, and so he had a few months to prepare for his death. And it got me to thinking, are we preparing our children for our own deaths? We've talked about this, talking about death before in this platform, but we really haven't talked about our own mortality. And let's face it, none of us are getting out of here alive. So, sisters, I wanted to talk today about what we can do if you have minor children, how you should prepare for if something should happen tragically while they're still minor children, what you should do with your estate to make sure that the state doesn't take all your money and your property, who you should sign as an executor. How are we preparing our children for our death? It's not going to be an easy conversation. So, Barbara, Naima?
Well, I will say this, and I think that as a parent, if you are ill, you have some kind of terminal illness, or any number of those kind of things, that sort of sets the stage for preparation. But what if it's sudden? You weren't sick. One of my friends, she was having tea one morning with her mom, and her mom went out for a run. She came to the train tracks. The train was parked in the station, and she went around the train, but she was hit by the ghost train. You have this little Japanese lady flying up in the air. I'm sure the Lord snatched her before she hit the ground, but she was dead instantly. And my friend said the hardest thing was that she didn't get to say goodbye. And the husband said, I always thought that I would be the one to go first. And at the time, they were in their 70s, and so it was hard. And I've had a number of friends, I'm sorry to say, who have died suddenly, instantly of a heart attack. I found out about my friend Flo from college, who is my age. When she didn't answer her phone, people were worried, and they found her by her treadmill. She had died of a massive heart attack. My friend Jan Moskowitz in New York, someone pushed him on the subway and he fell and was injured greatly and ended up dying from his injuries from that fall. And I've had two friends who were killed instantly in plane crashes, and another one in just a couple of years ago who was killed by a semi hitting her and her son in the middle of winter. And she was younger than I was. And they had young kids. Some of them had adult kids, but some of them also had children that were elementary school age. And so when you're taken suddenly, you haven't had a sit down talk with young children about, if I go to be with the Lord or I pass away, any of those things. You don't really have that talk with young kids. You actually start thinking about those things when your kids are older. And I will say during the pandemic, that it started like 2.5 years ago, and we were on lockdown, we couldn't go anywhere. Eric and I sat down and wrote our obituaries because I said, I can't remember everything you did. I don't want to be trying to do this at the last minute. And so we wrote our obituaries. and sent copies to all of our kids, said, no, we're not dying, but this is what we want in case something happens and there's nobody there to take care of stuff. We got our financial aid things in order, went to a financial advisor, got all of our finances, our monies, our holdings, our bonds, or this or that, got that all situated so that things would be divided up equally between our 3 kids. And then we also went to one of those free dinners where you have to sit through a lecture about planning a funeral for yourself or a memorial service. And a person actually came to our apartment to visit and tell us all the things that would require to have ourselves buried without the expense being fallen on our kids. Now, my kids are adults, so yes, we have planned for those kind of things. We haven't really had the talk, though. What about you, Naima?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I remember when it's about a week before before Daddy went into the hospital, he had this big, thick notebook, all of his papers, insurance, everything. And he went over all of that with me. Okay, this is all my certificates, my papers, and and I'm getting a veterans burial, all that. I mean, he wasn't sick at the time, but we had been going through that cycle of him going back and forth to the hospital and that sort of thing.
Which is the beginning of the end.
Yeah. And so it was a week before his last time of going into the hospital. And we sat down and he went through and I'm so grateful that he was organized. He had all of his paperwork in order, all of his documents and everything. So there would not be any stressful situation. We know what he wanted said on his obituary, all his background, everything, his war record and everything. So I was able, and when the time came, I was able to write an article, which they published in the Chicago Defender about his life. And that was really nice. And I was able to put together the obituary for the program, but he had put all those things in place, and that was one of the things that I'm grateful for, that I didn't have to deal with at all. But one of the things that I realize is that a lot of times people won't talk about it because it's like the superstition of believing, well, if I talk about it, then I'll make it happen, which is ridiculous. It's going to happen when it's going to happen.
And what happens is that you throw your family into chaos if you die without a will.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a plan so that you don't have people fighting on what's supposed to happen. Now, I remember my mother-in-law, at one point she was telling me, well, when I passed away, I put my papers in a certain place. And she said, I can talk to you about this because I know my sons, they don't want to talk about it. And she's right. They didn't want to talk about it because they, oh, Ma, you're not going to die. I mean, so she knew that they would not be able to have that conversation, even though it's a conversation you need to have. And so, but things went smoothly with her. Even though it was more difficult because her she went through the stages of Alzheimer's, which is difficult for your children as they see you mentally leaving before your body is gone. So right. that was, I think, the hardest thing for them. I think it's difficult when you go suddenly and there's no preparation, no talk, nobody knows what to do, everybody's in shock. That's probably the hardest thing for any family, because a lot of times, especially if you have several siblings and you can't agree on what should be done, then families really fall apart then. So now with my own personal situation, because my husband Sultan was diagnosed with cancer, and even though they said it was terminal, we were like, we're gonna beat this, And so that was the spirit with which we had it, even as he declined. And there was a certain point where we knew that he was not going to survive this much longer. So I took Zakia out to dinner and we had the conversation. I said, it looks like I'm going to be a widow at a fairly young age. And she had very good advice for me. She was saying, well, Ma, he's already raised me to adulthood. So don't think, I got to get married to somebody to be a father for my daughter. I don't need a father figure. Just look for somebody for yourself. Somebody a little close to your age. Somebody who, you feel fit into our family, because we got a multicultural family and multiracial family, so it's somebody who can, be okay with that. And somebody who makes you laugh, you can have fun, you need to lighten up a little bit, not so serious this time. So, she had really good advice. And then we were both there the morning that Sultan transitioned from this physical life. I called her into the room. I was in the room with him. And so, as his pulse slowed to a stop and he stopped breathing. So we both were there at that moment. And I know that she is aware of the fact that things could happen with me suddenly, even though I am in good health. She worries a lot about my driving because she knows I tend to keep going and going and going until I'm exhausted. And she knows that I have fallen asleep behind the wheel a few times, and one time she said to me, Mom, you're the only parent I have left. So I know that that's a concern of hers.
And should be for you too.
Well, yeah, yeah, it is. But she and I did have that talk even about, my demise at some point. I told her about my insurance policies and everything, and, where everything is, and, all my accounts and all of that, making sure that she has access to banks, everything, records, all of that, insurance policies, my obituary, it's already done. All of the instructions are already done for my funeral. I just have to probably buy a funeral plot because I don't think I'm going to get cremated. So I'm going to make sure everything is done so that all you got to do is just show up, so there's no grief. There's no, what are we going to do? Oh, none of that. Hey, we going to party when I'm gone. So,
well, we will.
Yeah, I know I will. Yeah,
you won't.
But
well, this is the thing though. But it's more than just preparing your physical stuff and buying the plot. It is more about having the conversation, because some people may have minor children and they may have spouses that don't want to talk about it. Now, the first time we actually talked about it, because this is what happens if you have a minor child and you do not make provisions. You may have family, but if you don't specifically say who is going to step in, the state steps in and puts your child in foster care until they can figure out who will take your child, even if you have family right there. And you have to understand that, because what happened with us was Sarah was going to go to Paris and Rome. She was 15 and she was going on this trip, and she was going in this school trip, which was great. And Sean said, well, let's go to Florida. And I said, well, I'm not setting foot outside of this state until we have a will, because if God forbid something happens to us, she needs to have a home to go to, right, and they have to know who's going to take care of us, who's going to take care of her. If one of my sisters is going to move into her house so it doesn't disrupt her life. I think, Barbara, you said you all would at the time. And these are the things. But before then, he didn't want to talk about a will. He didn't want to talk about, care for Sarah, because he says, oh, somebody in our family will step in. Well, yeah, somebody might, and somebody might not. He has two sisters here. She's close to, her cousins, but they have their own families and they live in other neighborhoods. They live in other cities. So that means that she would have to disrupt everything. And so I did not want that for her, and also with the stress of losing her parents. And as an only child, that would even be more stressful for her, going into a situation with a different home, even if they were people that we knew, and of course not knowing whether or not they would take her. See, that's the thing, is sometimes people make these assumptions and it doesn't happen. Maybe there's a sickness or an illness in the house, or people go bankrupt or something happens and they said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have the money.
Can't do it now for
And
whatever reason, because a lot of
we
different things happen to change, and
change
sometimes the
the
relationship changes with the people that you thought you were going to. Because I know when
That's
Zakia
right.
was younger, and Sultan and I had the conversation. Well, if something happens to us, what family would we trust? And at one point it was one family. They lived in I think Racine at the time. And at another point it was another family, and they lived in St. Louis. So it's different families at different times that we thought would be best for her upbringing if something happened. Now, of course, I mean, I'm glad we didn't have to make that choice, but things change. And
Yeah.
I don't know if either of those choices would have been the best choice based on how things changed over time, even as Zakia grew and developed and became who she has become. I don't know if their parenting style would have given her the direction she now has and the freedom she now has to be who she has become. So
And that's
Carol,
the
I
thing.
could not agree with you more. When you are younger, sometimes you make decisions that you think are going to be wise decisions of different people, like, oh, I like this couple and they seem like they got it together. That couple today is divorced. And you think,
And if
oh,
your child is not, has not been legally adopted, they may just say, you know what, we don't have room for you anymore.
yeah.
yeah.
Like you
And that's
said, things definitely change. And you have to, number one, I think it is important. If you have young kids, you need to know your people that you are willing to leave them with should something happen to you in an untimely
Yes.
manner. Because I think idealistically, when you're a young couple with young kids and you have friends and you're thinking everything is okay, but you don't know the intimacies of their households.
Right.
And sometimes you might be setting your child up to be put in a dangerous situation and you think it's safe. So you need to really know your people, know what kind of situation that you would be leaving your child with. I actually know of a story, this is a true story, of a couple who had planned to leave their kids with someone, and those people turned out to be criminals, but nobody knew that.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing is that, and COVID should have
Wow.
taught us that anyway, because there were so many people there were a lot of COVID orphans, even before the vaccine and even afterward. But there are a lot of people, they hadn't planned on this. Then they go into the hospital and all of a sudden, you've got young kids who are, orphaned, and the parents, or maybe the grandparents can take them, and they had planned on their life being different, maybe traveling or whatever. We had stories about that, and all of a sudden they're raising, preschoolers up to, high schoolers all over again.
And they
And
hadn't
so
planned on it.
we have to start thinking. And I remember even now, and all our kids are grown, and I've got the youngest one, but it's like the last time we went away, I gave Sarah my password to my bank account. And I said, okay, just keep this with you, because I said, if anything happens, you need to at least be able to access the money in our account.
Yeah.
Because and also you need to make sure that if you have a home, that you place that home in trust to your child. Don't plan on estate planning. Go to an attorney or someone, go to your financial advisor, like Barbara was saying, and make sure that your kids will get the money that the state will take if you don't do that. And and a lot of these things, and going through probate can take long time. And if your kids need something, then they need to have it then. And I'm talking about people who have young kids, but you also have to have somebody that you can trust to say, okay, you're not going to take my kids' money and put them in foster care and then, whatever. So there's a lot. But the thing is that we have to prepare not only ourselves, but we have to prepare our children for the fact, okay, if this happens, I think at one time, Zakia had said, well, she would, want to be with me. And I said, well, that's fine. I would just raise her Muslim. I can do that, you know, and but you have to talk to the people, because sometimes your relatives or your best friends don't want to raise your kids.
And you
They
can
may love
assume a
you,
lot of
they
things
may
like
love them, but you can't
yeah.
be, but they're not set up for it, and they don't want to make that sacrifice, and you can't take that personally.
Yeah, and like Barbara was saying also, you have to know people, because you know what you do in your home, and you
Yeah.
know how you take care of your children. You really don't know what they do in their home and how they treat their children and how they're going to treat yours. You assume things when you're all together and you're friends and everything and you're hanging out, but you don't know what's happening in that house. You don't know what other relatives they have, and they might
Right.
have that person that shouldn't be around children. Yeah, you got
Yeah.
all of that. So
Yeah, not to be like the fairy tale story, but Cinderella's stepmother was really kind to her until her father died, and then she came all out of a bag.
is that how the story went? Yeah. So that happens, and you can't assume that somebody will take them, and you never, like you say, make those plans
And never make any
have that
choices,
conversation.
because you don't want to
Yeah.
have that conversation. You
Yeah.
don't want to think, you know what?
You
Like
can
I
make
said,
it happen if you talk about it.
none of us are getting out of here alive. So,
Unless we're raptured.
you yeah, right. Okay. You plan on that. The rest of us are going to have to think that even if you raptured, Barbara, that means you're still not here.
That's true.
You are
And
not
how
on earth.
young do you think you should have that talk with your children? When they're older, you're definitely planning on it.
Well,
But
when they're babies, you don't want to alarm them. And like I said, we've on this platform, we've talked about death with your children. You can't tell your kids, oh, they're only sleeping. You can't tell only old people
Yeah,
die.
you never say those
Point,
things.
yeah,
Yes.
because at some point, if you tell them only old people die, they may have a classmate who dies.
And that happens.
So you
That
need to
usually
say,
happens.
well, you know what, we're all, and if you're a person of faith, I happen to be a person of faith also, I'll say, we will be together again someday, but I'm going to take care of you for whenever, I can't, I'm going to make sure that someone will always take care of you, because that's what frightens children, is that they will be left out in the cold.
yeah,
And I
the
think there's a little
unknown.
book that somebody, gave me when Sarah was little, and I kept it, and it was about, I will be there waiting for you when you get ready to come, but that's the thing, is that you talk to your children and you make it in stages. You talk to them little by little, and and if they're too alarmed, say, well, we're hoping this won't happen, but I'm going to be with you until the end of the age. There's going to be a part of me that is going to live in you, and actually, cellular wise, it actually does. But, there's going to be a part of me that's going to live in you forever. And you know what? And you will always be able to talk to me. And that's if you're a person of faith. If you're a person of no faith, or you're an atheist, it's okay to say, well, when we're gone, we're gone. But you let them know that you will still make arrangements for them to be okay. And that's, whatever your faith journey is, or no faith journey, you still need to prepare your children for the fact that we're all going to die. And that's the thing is, but for the ones who are left, this is what I'm doing. And so we prepare ourselves, but we have to prepare our spouses who don't want to talk about it, and our family members who don't want to talk about it, and our friends who don't want to talk about it.
Exactly.
And
And the longer you live, the more you will see people pass on. I have to say, almost every other month, I will get an email message from my high school people who, handle the reunions. They'll send you a little message that someone has died.
This is the season, when you reach a certain age now, of course.
More funerals than weddings.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned this before, when Sultan and I first got married. It's like every month we were going to a funeral. That was how I got to know all his family. And then Zakia was born, and she's like 2, 3, 4 years old. I mean, that became our family outing. Oh, Uncle so-and-so passed away. Aunt so-and-so passed away. And so naturally when you're going to funerals and a child is going to the funeral, the subject of death is going to come up. I think parents make a mistake, like you say, saying things like, oh, they're just asleep or whatever. You know, let them understand that you do your spirit leaves your body at a certain time, and it's okay. You know, like you say, I mean, people of faith, they have the language that they are going to use. Well, you go back to God, from God we come, to God we return. That's, what our faith teaches. So that was what Zacchaeus understood. And thankfully, she did not have, while she was a child, a classmate or anything die, but a lot of children today, they are experiencing that. We experience all these different tragedies that are happening. So there's a lot of fear that
School
children
shootings,
have.
hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, how
And my best
hard
friend,
is that?
Deborah Thurman, she was 16 when she died,
Yeah.
like months before graduation. She
And
had
that's
bone
that.
cancer. We were not expecting that.
Yeah. And then when you
When
don't
Sarah
have,
had a girl, there was a girl, I think when Sarah was just in 7th grade, who died of meningitis in her school. She didn't know her, but she had seen her around. And so she
Mhm.
said, oh, we probably would have been friends. We had the same kind of necklace. And so, and there was another kid, he didn't die. He was in a tragic car wreck. And so
Yeah.
things, because our children will see these things, and like I said, with
You're
school
going to
shootings
ask.
suddenly being an epidemic in this country, and them having school active shooter drills, you have to talk about death.
We have to talk
So
about
we
it.
have to
Yeah.
prepare. I mean, we can't have them be scared all the time,
And then
but
don't say anything,
don't
oh,
say
we don't talk
anything.
about that. Well, that's not
Yeah.
helpful. That creates more stress when you are concerned as a child and no one will talk about it. That makes you even more frightened.
Yeah.
You do have to be willing to address their fears in
Yeah.
a calm manner,
Yeah.
in a way that they can grasp it and be settled about it.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, we're and we're all afraid of it. We all want to get to heaven, but none of us want to die.
I
So
know we all want to go some other way. If we,
I'm
a lot of people are
I'm just
fans
going
of
to heaven to go.
going to sleep and waking up in heaven. But I've had like, oh my
I
goodness,
think
I
that's
just can't
wow.
believe how many friends I've had who've had massive heart attacks instantly and they're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had healthy
First,
friends.
one of my best friends from forever, for 1st grade, Betty, she died before her 60th birthday.
Yeah.
So, we don't know what our personal expiration dates are, but
Right.
we all have one.
We all
Yeah.
have one. We came here with an
Yeah.
expiration date. We're just not
So
allowed to know what it is, so we don't focus on that date and we can get the work done we're supposed to get done while we're here.
while we're
Right.
here,
Yes.
but we do have to prepare our children for the fact that we are, and we hope to precede them in death, because I think there's nothing worse than having to bury a child, and I've known friends who've had to do that too. So you
Yeah.
have to understand that you're not, we're all going to be fearful, but we still have to deal with the reality, and
Yeah.
we have to be grown-ups.
Yeah. And
We have to
sometimes
be
children handle a lot better than we expect them to when we talk to them calmly about it. And
Yes.
sometimes they show some amazing wisdom. They say, oh, I understand. And they're fine. So
Yes.
we got to talk. Well, it's time to go. And we hope if you have children and they ask you about the inevitable, that you go ahead and talk about it. And don't make it something that they're afraid to express, even if someone close to them passes away. Let them know
And
it's
you
a
don't
normal part of
necessarily
life.
have to wait for them to bring the question up. You
That's right.
find an avenue where you can have a calm conversation about the afterlife and to address their fears in a way that keeps them from being fearful.
Absolutely. That's what you do. Well, we appreciate you. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, Three Black Moms. Until next week, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Barbara. We are Three Black Moms. Have a great week. Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.